Chris Mackowski of Emerging Civil War. I'm standing outside the Dover Hotel in Dover, Tennessee, just a stone's throw away from Fort Donelson. And here is where a Civil War legend was born, and arguably the course of American history changed when Ulysses S. Grant accepted no terms but unconditional surrender from the Confederate forces that had been garrisoned in the fort. And that, of course, is one of the important steps in the ascension of Ulysses S. Grant to the eventual presidency years later. On the 16th of February, 1862, Grant accepted surrender from his old friend Simon Bolivar Buckner because Buckner's two superiors had decided to duck out in embarrassment and leave the surrender to him. Buckner was hoping to get some favorable terms from his old friend, but Grant said, unconditional surrender, I propose to move on your works at once. Buckner was a little offended that his friend offered such terms, but did accept them, having no other alternative. Some 13,000 Confederates surrendered as a result, and really the Union Army was unprepared for such a large influx of prisoners. It was the largest surrender in the Civil War up to that point. And so the Confederates who surrendered here, an entire army, were shipped north and sent to hastily constructed prison camps all up and down the Mississippi, in Illinois, shipped across the north to various places, some as far away as Massachusetts. And the North just didn't quite know what to do with them. Conditions were pretty harsh. By September of '62, most of those prisoners were exchanged out, but it was a harsh lesson for the North in figuring out what they were actually going to do with the logistical difficulty of trying to care for and manage so many prisons. So it's really going to kind of be a shock to Northerners in that regard. Meanwhile, Grant and Buckner met here at the Dover Hotel. This building dates back to about 1851. The sign out front says the building was somewhere around a decade old by the time the two old friends met here. Now, it's really important, though, that there was a tone of magnanimity that was set here at the Dover Hotel, not only between these two old friends. I mean, Grant pulled Buckner aside afterward and said, hey, do you have enough money to get home? It's repayment of a debt that Buckner had offered Grant when Grant resigned from the Army in disgrace years earlier, trying to head back to St. Louis, runs out of money in New York, and Buckner, his old friend, pulls him aside and says, hey, do you have enough money to get home? Grant always remembered that kindness and extended that same offer to Buckner, who here says that he's doing okay. But beyond that, Union soldiers are under orders not to cheer, not to taunt, not to harass the Confederates as they've been surrendered. So as a result, there's feeling this tone of respect that's established. It's also going to go a long way toward really establishing Grant's reputation among soldiers as he pushes forward, because of course he'll oversee a number of surrenders over the course of the war, including Vicksburg and Appomattox. The Dover Hotel will operate until the 1930s, although it will see Civil War action again in February of '63 when Nathan Bedford Forrest comes back. Remember, he sneaks away in the dark of night just before the surrender here in February of '62. He comes back in February of '63 trying to drive Federals out of this area unsuccessfully. There's a battle here in February of '63. Nearly the entire town of Dover burns down, but this hotel will actually survive. It'll operate until the 1930s, but it will begin to deteriorate. It's eventually restored when it becomes part of the Park Service. Little of the original structure remains because of the extensive renovations that have happened over the year, but you can walk on that wooden porch and hear the sounds of history and evoke that sense of what it was like for Grant and Buckner to be here in one of those key moments of the Civil War. Here in Dover, Tennessee, part of Fort Donelson National Park, I'm Chris Mackowski for Emerging Civil War.